I was the only one without a gift under the tree. But I didn't break down. I reached into my wallet and everything shifted. My name is Harold Whitmore. I'm 73 years old, and I live by myself in a modest ranch-style home just outside Knoxville, Tennessee. The silence here runs deep, the kind that some folks call crushing loneliness, but I've learned to find comfort in it. I rise with the dawn, brew my coffee exactly 3 minutes longer than most people would, and settle into my weathered leather chair where the morning light catches the hardwood floors just right. Afternoons are for crossword puzzles and old westerns on TV. The evening news comes on at 6 sharp, and by 9:30 I'm calling it a night. There's something soothing about routine, especially after losing my wife Margaret 8 years ago. We shared 43 years together. She had gentle hands and the most infectious laugh you'd ever hear, could light up a whole room just by walking in. Margaret was a seamstress by trade, but she had a gift for fixing more than torn fabric. She knew how to mend hearts too. When she passed from that damn cancer, it felt like someone had ripped the foundation right out from under my life. For months I couldn't figure out how to stand upright again. But day by day, I managed to piece together something resembling stability. I wasn't exactly thriving. Hell, I wasn't even close, but I was breathing, which was more than I thought I could manage in those first dark months. I hadn't spoken to my daughter Rachel in over 14 months. Not a real conversation anyway. Maybe a few obligatory text messages on birthdays. A single photo of my grandkids dressed up for Halloween last year. That was the extent of our communication. Rachel and her husband Derek had been slowly backing away from me for years. It started right after Margaret's memorial service. Derek became distant, almost cold. Rachel got busier with work, the kids' activities, everything except spending time with her old man. Phone calls stopped coming. Sunday visits became a thing of the past. One day I looked up and realized I'd become a stranger in my own daughter's life. So when my phone rang on a bitter Thursday morning in early December, and Rachel's name appeared on the screen, my first instinct was to check if I'd accidentally called her. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. "Hello there." "Hey, Dad." Rachel's voice carried that forced cheerfulness that immediately put me on guard. "How are you doing?" "Fine enough," I said. "What's going on?" She laughed nervously. "Can't a daughter just call to chat with her father?" I waited. Rachel was never one for small talk, especially not with me. "Okay. So Derek and I were talking," she continued, "and we want to invite you to Atlanta for Christmas this year. The whole family will be together." I stared out at my front yard, where the old oak tree stood bare against the gray December sky. I hadn't been invited to anything in almost 4 years, not even to Tommy's middle school graduation ceremony. "That's unexpected," I said slowly. I know. Rachel rushed on. "It's been too long, Dad. The kids keep asking about Grandpa Harold. Derek thought it was time we all got together again." "Derek thought it was time?" I didn't voice that observation. "I'll need to think about it," I said. "Of course. We'd really love to have you here." After we hung up, I sat staring at the phone for a long while. Rachel had always been polite, but there was something underneath that politeness, a coolness I'd never been able to break through. Derek never seemed to like me much. Behind all their careful manners, I could feel how they saw me, as an obligation, a chore to be managed rather than a person they actually wanted around. The last Christmas I'd spent with them was 5 years ago. I'd driven down to Atlanta with a cooler full of Margaret's famous cornbread dressing and presents for everyone. I remember Derek making some comment about my truck being too loud in their neighborhood. Rachel kept checking her watch during dinner like she had somewhere more important to be. When they handed out gifts that night, my name never got called. Everyone got something. Derek's parents who'd flown in from Phoenix, Rachel's sister-in-law, even the neighbors' kids who'd stopped by. But somehow, they'd forgotten about me entirely. Not one person noticed. I sat there in that uncomfortable silence, nursing my coffee, watching everyone else tear through wrapping paper and laugh. I left the next morning without making a fuss. That was the day I stopped reaching out. But now, suddenly, They wanted me back at their table. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself another cup of coffee and stirred it slowly. I could feel that familiar ache building up, the one that whispers, "Why weren't you worth remembering?" But there was another voice too, one that had been getting stronger lately. "They have no idea who you've become." I picked up my phone and texted Rachel back, "I'll be there." Then I walked to my bedroom and opened the bottom drawer of my old oak dresser. Inside was a manila envelope, thick with documents, all stamped and notarized. The header read, "Q4 Financial Summary, Golden Years Digital, LLC." They didn't know who I'd become, but they were about to find out. After Margaret died, I tried desperately to hold on to what was left. Sunday dinners at Rachel's house, birthday parties for the grandkids, holiday gatherings. I showed up with covered dishes, thoughtful gifts, stories the kids might find interesting. I offered to help with school pickups when Derek traveled for work. I wanted them to know I was still part of their lives, still their family. At first, they included me, but something had shifted. The atmosphere felt different, strained. Derek would make little comments that stung, about my clothes being out of style, my stories being too long, my truck being too beat up for their neighborhood. Rachel never corrected him. She just changed the subject with an uncomfortable laugh. If I brought over food, Rachel would say things like, "Dad, we're trying to eat cleaner now," and quietly move my dish to a corner of the counter where it would sit untouched. When I tried to help Tommy with his math homework, Derek would interrupt, "We've got a tutor for that." When I suggested we all go fishing at the lake, Rachel would explain how busy they were with soccer practice and piano lessons. Always an excuse, always a reason to keep me at arm's length. I remember one particularly painful Sunday when Derek was showing off their new smart TV setup, some kind of system that connected to everything in the house. He demonstrated it for his parents, Rachel's book club friends who'd stop by, even the teenage kid from next door. But when I asked a simple question about how it worked, he sighed and said, "Harold, it's probably too complicated to explain." The room went quiet. Rachel looked embarrassed, but not for me. Of me. These little cuts accumulated over time. I stopped being invited to family outings. When I suggested weekend trips or offered to take the grandkids to a movie, there was always some conflict, some prior commitment. When I called to chat, conversations became shorter and more superficial. The only one who really stayed connected was my grandson Tommy. He was 14, old enough to have his own phone, and he'd send me pictures of his art projects or ask about my time in the Navy. Nothing deep, but it reminded me that I mattered to someone in that family. Then came my 71st birthday. I didn't expect a party or anything elaborate, but I figured I'd get a phone call, maybe a card. Maybe one of the grandkids would text me a happy birthday. I waited all day, checked my mailbox 3 times, nothing but bills and grocery store flyers. By evening, I finally accepted the truth. They'd forgotten. Or maybe forgetting was too generous. Maybe they just didn't think it was worth remembering. I made myself a simple dinner, sat in Margaret's chair, and wept harder than I had since her funeral. Not because I needed gifts or cake, but because I realized something fundamental had changed. I was no longer a priority in their lives. I'd become background noise, a peripheral character in their story. That night, something inside me shifted. I stopped calling them. And you know what? In that silence, I found something unexpected. Room to breathe. With all that empty time stretching in front of me, I started looking for something, anything, that would make me feel useful again. I wasn't ready to just sit around waiting for death. I had ideas, energy, and a little money saved up from Margaret's insurance and my Navy pension. I'd always enjoyed writing. Back in my 20s, I used to contribute pieces to the base newsletter. Margaret always said I had a way with words. After she passed, I'd started keeping a journal, just to process my grief. Reading those entries later, I thought maybe other people going through similar experiences might find them helpful. I decided to learn about this internet thing everyone was talking about. Bought myself a decent computer, not top of the line, but reliable. Found some YouTube tutorials designed for seniors. Learned about blogs, social media, email newsletters. The technology was intimidating at first, but I kept a notebook beside my computer and wrote down every step. Took me weeks to figure out the basics, but I was determined. If other folks my age could do it, so could I. I found an online course called Digital Marketing for the 60-plus crowd. Cost me $47. Best investment I ever made. The instructor was a retired teacher from Oregon who explained everything in plain English. No fancy jargon, just clear step-by-step instructions. That's when I came up with the name for my blog, Second Chapter Stories. That's what this felt like, not starting over but turning the page to a new chapter of my life. I bought the domain name and used a simple website builder to publish my first post. I called it, What They Don't Tell You About Being a Widower at 70. It got 8 views the first day, then 15. A week later, a woman named Betty from Arizona left a comment. This is exactly what I'm going through. Thank you for putting words to my feelings. I stared at that comment like it was made of gold. Someone understood. Someone was listening. I joined a Facebook group called Senior Entrepreneurs. No nonsense, just real people over 60 trying to build something meaningful. We shared advice, celebrated small victories, and supported each other through the learning curve. That group became the highlight of my day. One member posted about something called Amazon Kindle Direct Publishing. You could write short books, publish them yourself, and earn royalties. I followed her instructions and put together a 55-page guide called Starting Over After Loss: A Widower's Journey. I priced it at $4.99, not expecting much. But it sold. Not hundreds immediately, but a steady trickle every week. Then someone shared it in a grief support group online. Suddenly I was getting emails from men in Texas, California, even Canada. Men who felt forgotten, invisible, lost after losing their wives. Within 6 months, that little book had sold over 3,200 copies. I was earning more money than I ever expected, but more importantly, I was connecting with people who understood what I'd been through. I learned how to create simple digital products, journals for grief processing, checklists for widowers managing household tasks for the first time, guides for navigating Social Security and insurance paperwork. I kept my prices fair because I knew my customers weren't wealthy. They were men like me, just looking for someone who understood their struggle. By age 72, I launched a paid newsletter called The Long View. Every Friday, I sent out a piece about aging with dignity, finding purpose after loss, dealing with loneliness, maintaining independence. My first month, 52 men subscribed at $6 per month, then 89, then 156. One evening, I logged into my dashboard and saw a number that made me sit back in my chair. Monthly recurring revenue of $2,047. Not because it was a fortune, but because I'd built it from nothing, alone in my little house in Knoxville. I didn't tell Rachel or Derek, not because I wanted to hide it, but because I knew they wouldn't understand its significance. They'd either dismiss it as a cute hobby or try to take over and improve it. I didn't need their approval anymore. I'd found my own path. I saved every penny I earned and reinvested carefully in better tools, professional editing, improved website design. I upgraded my phone so I could record voice memos when ideas struck me during my morning walks. I even hired a graphic designer in Nashville to create a proper logo and color scheme. Orders came in daily. Readers wrote me heartfelt letters. One man from Montana sent me a photo of his late wife, saying my book had helped him finally clean out her closet. Another sent me his grandfather's watch as a thank you gift, saying he had no sons to pass it down to, but wanted it to go to someone who understood its value. I wasn't just earning money. I was building community with men who'd felt forgotten by their own families. While Rachel posted pictures of Derek's promotion and the kids' soccer victories, I quietly built something real and meaningful. When Derek bragged on Facebook about their new boat, I smiled and kept working on my next book. I stayed silent, kept building. And one way or another, this Christmas they were going to see exactly what their boring old dad had accomplished. The drive from Knoxville to Atlanta took exactly 4 hours and 23 minutes. I packed my overnight bag the night before, along with a small cooler of gifts I'd chosen carefully. Nothing extravagant, a nice scarf for Rachel that matched her favorite colors, a book about World War II aircraft for Tommy, a gift card for Derek to that fancy coffee place he always talked about. I wore my best slacks, a button-down shirt Margaret had bought me before she got sick, and a navy blazer that still fit well. My hair was neatly combed, my shoes polished. I looked like myself, presentable, dignified. When I pulled into their subdivision, I had to admit the place was impressive. McMansions with perfect lawns, luxury cars in every driveway. Derek's success as a pharmaceutical sales manager had clearly paid off well. I sat in my truck for a few minutes before walking to the front door. The house was larger than I remembered, brick and stone with those black shutters that were trendy now. 2 new SUVs in the driveway, both with temporary tags. Rachel answered the door wearing a forced smile. "Dad, you made it." She hugged me quickly, the kind of hug you give distant relatives at funerals. Her perfume was overpowering, something floral and expensive. Come in," she said, stepping aside to wave me into the foyer. The house smelled like vanilla and pine. Everything was immaculate, like something from a magazine. The Christmas tree in the living room looked professionally decorated. Gold and silver ornaments, perfectly placed lights, not a single handmade decoration visible. Derek appeared from the kitchen, smartphone in hand. "Harold, good to see you." His handshake was firm but brief, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Traffic wasn't too bad," I said. Good. Rachel's got lunch ready whenever you're hungry." The grandkids were sprawled on the sectional sofa, eyes glued to their tablets. I waved at them. "Hey there, Tommy." "Hi, Sarah." Tommy looked up briefly. "Hey, Grandpa." Sarah just mumbled something without lifting her gaze from her screen. Rachel showed me to the guest room upstairs. It was small, clearly the least used room in the house. The bedding looked like it came from a discount store, and the dresser had a thin layer of dust on top. The overhead light flickered when I turned it on. "If you need anything, just holler," Rachel said, already heading for the door. I unpacked quietly, hanging my blazer in the narrow closet, placing my toiletries on the bathroom counter. I set the gifts in the corner and laid out my pajamas on the bed. Sitting on the edge of the mattress, I looked around the sparse room and took a deep breath. This was going to be interesting. Later, we gathered around their dining room table. Rachel had prepared something elaborate, herb-crusted salmon with quinoa salad and roasted vegetables arranged like artwork on each plate. There were place cards at each setting. Mine was positioned at the far end of the table, closest to the kitchen. The conversation flowed around me like I was a piece of furniture. Derek talked about his company's holiday bonus structure. Rachel mentioned some promotion opportunity at her marketing firm. Tommy asked about upgrading his gaming setup. Sarah wanted to know about getting her ears pierced. Nobody asked how I'd been. Nobody inquired about what I was doing with my time or whether I was staying healthy. I might as well have been invisible. Midway through dinner, Rachel looked over at me with that patronizing smile I'd grown to recognize. "So, Dad, what have you been up to these days? Still keeping busy with your retirement activities?" The way she said retirement activities made the table chuckle softly. Even Tommy grinned. I cut a piece of salmon and chewed slowly. "Oh, staying occupied." Derek nodded knowingly. "That's good, Harold. Important to have hobbies at your age." Hobbies. I took another bite and let them continue their conversation about things that actually mattered to them. Derek's golf game, Rachel's book club, the kids' school activities. They still saw me as just another retiree killing time until death. They had no idea what I'd been building. Not yet. I woke at 5:47 a.m., as I always do. The house was quiet except for the gentle hum of the heating system and Derek's snoring from down the hall. I got dressed, made the bed with military precision, and went downstairs. Rachel was already in the kitchen wearing matching Christmas pajamas and preparing what looked like an elaborate breakfast spread. Cinnamon rolls in the oven, fresh fruit arranged artistically, coffee brewing in their expensive machine. "Morning, Dad. Sleep okay?" "Just fine. Need any help?" She waved me off. "I've got it covered. You just relax." So I sat at the kitchen island while she bustled around, orchestrating the morning like a director managing a stage production. Derek wandered in wearing his matching pajamas, already scrolling through his phone. The kids appeared eventually, energized by the promise of presents. By 8:30 we'd gathered in the living room. The tree was surrounded by dozens of wrapped gifts, each tagged with elegant calligraphy and topped with perfect bows. The fireplace crackled with artificial logs, and classical Christmas music played softly through hidden speakers. "Okay, everyone," Rachel clapped her hands. "Present time." The kids dove in immediately. Tommy unwrapped a new gaming laptop and cheered. Sarah squealed over a jewelry-making kit and some art supplies. Derek opened a set of premium golf clubs from Rachel and whistled appreciatively. Rachel tore into a large box from Derek, revealing a designer handbag she'd obviously picked out herself. They posed for photos, hugged each other, laughed at inside jokes. I sat in the wingback chair near the window, sipping coffee and observing the controlled chaos. Then Rachel paused, looking around the room with a confused expression. "Wait, did we miss anyone?" Derek cleared his throat and studied his coffee cup. Tommy glanced at me, then quickly looked away. Sarah was already absorbed in her new art kit. "Oh my goodness," Rachel said with a nervous laugh. "Dad, I am so sorry. With everything going on, I completely forgot to get you anything. You know how crazy the holidays get." I nodded calmly. "Of course." Sarah looked up from her art supplies. "Grandpa doesn't get presents anymore. He's too old." The room laughed, not meanly, but casually, like it was an accepted truth. I set down my coffee cup and reached into my jacket pocket. "Actually," I said, "I got myself something this year." The laughter died down. Rachel tilted her head. "Oh?" I pulled out a folded document, 5 pages stapled together, nothing fancy. I placed it gently on the coffee table in front of me. "You know that little blog I mentioned starting a while back?" I said, keeping my tone conversational. Nobody moved. "Well, it's grown into something more substantial." I opened to the first page. It's called Second Chapter Stories. Has about 127,000 active readers now, mostly men over 65 dealing with loss, loneliness, starting over. Derek blinked. "Seriously?" I turned to the second page. I also publish books on Amazon, guides for widowers, journals for grief processing, practical advice for managing life after losing a spouse. Last quarter, I sold just over 4,800 books across 12 titles. Rachel squinted at the document. "Wait, this is real income?" "Yes," I said. "Built it myself. Learned everything online." I pointed to a highlighted number on the third page. Last quarter's net income, after all expenses, was $47,236. Silence. Complete silence. Tommy's mouth fell open. "Grandpa, you made that much money from a blog?" I nodded. "Along with the books, a paid newsletter, some digital courses. It's been growing steadily for 2 years now." Derek leaned forward. 47,000 in 3 months? "Sometimes more," I replied. "It varies by season. The holidays are usually strong for book sales." Rachel was staring at the document like it might disappear. "And you never mentioned this to us?" I looked around the room, at the expensive furniture, the professional Christmas decorations, the piles of costly gifts. When would I have mentioned it? We don't exactly have regular conversations. The room stayed quiet. Even the kids had put down their new toys. I reached into my other pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I also got myself this." I opened it and held up a brass key. "What's that?" Rachel asked. "Key to my new place," I said. 2-bedroom condo in downtown Knoxville. I closed on it last week. I smiled slightly. Elevator building, walking distance to the farmer's market and that new bookstore cafe I'd heard good things about. Derek's eyes widened. You bought a condo? Paid cash, I said. Figured it was time to downsize, get somewhere more manageable. I slipped the key back into the envelope. Moving next month. Nobody said anything for a long moment. Then I looked directly at Rachel. I didn't come here to show off or make anyone feel bad. I came because you invited me. I brought gifts. I showed up. I gestured toward the coffee table. And when there wasn't a place for me under your tree, I reminded myself that I'd already given myself the best gift I could ask for. What's that? Tommy asked quietly. I smiled at him, the first genuine smile I'd felt all morning. Independence, purpose, the knowledge that I don't need anyone else's permission to matter. The atmosphere in the room had completely changed. Gone was the casual dismissal, the patronizing smiles, the sense that I was just another item on their holiday to-do list. Derek kept looking between me and the financial documents like he was trying to solve a puzzle. Rachel sat perfectly still, her coffee growing cold in her hands. Tommy was the first to break the silence. Grandpa, can I read your blog? Of course, I said. Just search for second chapter stories, though some of it might be more relevant when you're older. He nodded seriously. This is so cool, you're like internet famous. Not famous, I corrected. Just helpful to people who need it. Rachel finally found her voice. Dad, why didn't you tell us about this sooner? I met her gaze steadily. When should I have told you? During one of our brief phone conversations? In the text messages you rarely answered? At the family gatherings I stopped being invited to? She looked uncomfortable. We didn't mean to. I'm not angry, I said, and I meant it. But let's be honest about what happened. After your mother died, you and Derek decided I was too much work to include regularly. Maybe it was grief, maybe it was just easier without me around. Either way, you made your choice. Derek cleared his throat. Harold, that's not how we saw it. How you saw it doesn't change how it felt, I replied calmly. For 3 years, I kept trying to stay connected. I called, I visited when you'd let me, I brought gifts, I offered to help with the kids. But every time there was a reason I didn't quite fit. Rachel's eyes were getting watery. Dad. I held up a gentle hand. Let me finish. That birthday when nobody called, my 71st, that was when I realized I had a choice. I could keep waiting for phone calls that weren't coming, or I could build something meaningful on my own. I leaned forward slightly. So I learned. I studied. I worked. And I discovered something remarkable. There are thousands of men out there just like me, widowers who feel invisible, men whose adult children got too busy for them, guys who thought their useful years were over. Tommy was listening intently. Even Sarah had stopped fiddling with her art supplies. I started writing for them, I continued, about what it's like to cook for one person after 40 years of marriage, how to manage a household when you've never done laundry or grocery shopping, how to deal with the loneliness that hits at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday when you realize nobody's expecting you anywhere. Derek was studying the financial report again. These numbers, this is more than I make some quarters. It's not about the money, I said. Though financial independence is nice, it's about purpose, community, feeling useful again. Rachel wiped her eyes. I had no idea you were going through all that. You never asked, I replied, but gently. And I stopped trying to tell you. The room fell quiet again. I could hear the artificial logs crackling in the fireplace, the distant sound of neighbors starting their cars. Finally, Derek spoke up. Harold, maybe we could, I don't know, help you expand this? Rachel's got marketing experience. I know people in digital advertising. I almost smiled. There it was, the offer to help now that they smelled success. I appreciate the thought, I said, but I'm not looking for partners. This business came from a very personal place. It's built on trust with men who feel forgotten by their own families. I can't maintain that authenticity if it becomes a family enterprise. Rachel looked hurt. We just want to support you. You can support me, I said, by understanding that I don't need rescuing anymore. I found my own way. I'm proud of what I built, and I'd like to share it with you, not hand it over to you. Tommy leaned forward. Grandpa, could you teach me some of this stuff? Like how to build websites and write things people want to read. Now that brought a real smile to my face. I'd love to, son. But it'll take time and patience. It's not something you learn in a weekend. I've got time, he said eagerly. I looked around the room one more time. I didn't come here to punish anyone or prove a point. I came because you invited me, and because underneath everything that's happened, I still love you all. I stood up and picked up the financial documents. But I also came to show you who I really am. Not just the sad widower you have to manage during holidays, but a man who's still growing, still contributing, still building something worthwhile. Rachel was openly crying now. Dad, I'm so sorry. We really messed this up. You didn't mess up, I said. You just made assumptions. We all do that sometimes. I walked over and kissed her forehead. But now you know better. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? The rest of Christmas morning passed differently. Derek put his phone away and asked actual questions about my blog, my writing process, how I'd learned to navigate the technology. Rachel wanted to know about my readers, who they were, what they were looking for, how I connected with them. The kids were fascinated. Tommy kept asking about website design and online marketing. Sarah, surprisingly, wanted to know about the writing part, how I came up with ideas, how I knew what people wanted to read. It's not complicated, I told them over lunch. You write about what you know, what you've lived through. You tell the truth even when it's uncomfortable. And you listen to the people who respond. But how did you know people would be interested? Rachel asked. I thought about that for a moment. I didn't at first, but I figured if I was struggling with something, other men probably were too. Loneliness isn't unique to me. Neither is feeling invisible after a certain age. Derek nodded slowly. I never thought about it that way. The invisible part, I mean. Society has a way of writing off older men, I said. We're supposed to retire, play golf, watch TV, and stay out of the way. But a lot of us aren't ready for that. We still have things to offer. That afternoon, Tommy sat with me at their kitchen table while I showed him the basics of my website dashboard. He was a quick learner, asking smart questions about analytics, subscriber growth, engagement rates. The technical stuff is just tools, I explained. The real work is understanding people. What keeps them awake at 2 a.m.? What do they wish someone would tell them? What would make them feel less alone? Rachel joined us, watching quietly as I walked through my process. Dad, this is really impressive. You've built something beautiful. Thank you, I said. It means a lot to hear you say that. That evening, after the kids had gone to bed, the three of us sat in their living room drinking coffee and having the most honest conversation we'd had in years. I owe you an apology, Derek said. I think after Margaret died, I didn't know how to handle your grief. It made me uncomfortable, so I just pulled back. I nodded. Grief makes everyone uncomfortable, including the person experiencing it. Rachel was twisting her wedding ring around her finger. I thought we were protecting you by not bothering you with our busy lives, but really, we were protecting ourselves from having to deal with your sadness. I understand, I said. But you should know, I wasn't asking you to fix my sadness. I just wanted to stay connected. We made a lot of assumptions, Derek admitted, about what you needed, what you could handle, what you were capable of. You assumed I was fragile, I said, but losing Margaret didn't break me. It changed me. There's a difference. Rachel leaned forward. What can we do now? How do we fix this? I smiled at her. You don't fix it. You just move forward differently. You include me in the real parts of your lives, not just the obligatory holiday check-ins. You ask me what I'm working on, what I'm excited about, what challenges I'm facing. And you share it with us, Derek added. Don't build walls just because we built them first. Fair enough, I said. Tommy appeared at the top of the stairs in his pajamas. Grandpa, Can I subscribe to your newsletter? I laughed. You're 14. You don't need advice about being a lonely widower. No, but I want to support what you're doing. And maybe I'll learn something about writing. All right then, I said. But don't expect me to tone down the content for younger audiences. He grinned. Deal. I left Atlanta the next morning with a lightness in my chest I hadn't felt in years. The conversation had been hard but honest. We'd cleared the air about things that had been festering for too long. Rachel hugged me at the door, a real hug this time, the kind that lasted more than 2 seconds. Dad, I want to do better, she said. I want to be part of your real life, not just the version you thought we wanted to see. I'd like that, I replied. Derek shook my hand and held it for a moment. Harold, what you've built, it's inspiring. Made me think about what I want to do with my own life after the kids are grown. Tommy ran out to my truck as I was loading my bag. Grandpa, wait. He handed me a folded piece of paper. I wrote down some questions about blogging. Could you answer them in an email sometime? I unfolded the paper and saw a neat list of thoughtful questions about audience building, content planning, monetization strategies. This kid had been paying attention. I'll answer every one, I promised. The drive back to Knoxville was peaceful. I put on some old country music and let my thoughts wander. For years, I'd felt like an outsider in my own family. Today, for the first time since Margaret died, I felt like I belonged somewhere again. My phone buzzed with text messages throughout the drive. Rachel sending photos of the financial documents she'd asked to keep copies, Tommy already following up on our conversation, even Derek sharing an article he'd found about senior entrepreneurs. When I got home, I made myself a cup of coffee and sat down at my computer. I had a newsletter to write for Friday's subscribers, and an idea had been forming during the drive. The subject line read, "The Christmas gift that changed everything." I wrote about showing up for people who'd forgotten you existed, about building something meaningful out of silence and solitude, about the difference between being overlooked and being underestimated. But mostly I wrote about second chances, the ones we give ourselves when we stop waiting for others to give them to us. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of comments from men who'd felt invisible in their own families, stories of adult children too busy for phone calls, grandparents forgotten during holidays, widowers navigating loneliness in a world that had no use for them. But also stories of transformation, men who'd started businesses, learned new skills, discovered communities they never knew existed, men who'd stopped waiting for permission to matter. One comment particularly stuck with me, from a 68-year-old man in Oregon. Harold, your story gave me permission to stop apologizing for taking up space. I've been invisible in my son's life for 6 years. Today, I'm starting my own woodworking YouTube channel. Thank you for showing me it's never too late to build something that matters. I read that comment 3 times, feeling something warm spread through my chest. This was why I'd started writing in the first place. Not for the money, though that was nice, but for the connection. For the chance to tell other forgotten men that they still had value, still had contributions to make. 3 weeks after returning from Atlanta, my life had taken on an entirely new rhythm. The phone calls from Rachel started coming regularly, not the stilted, obligatory conversations we used to have, but real talks about my business, her work, the kids' lives. She asked questions about my readers, my writing process, even my plans for the future. Derek had surprised me by calling one evening to discuss his own entrepreneurial ideas. Turns out he'd been thinking about starting a side business for years, but never had the courage to try. Seeing what you built, he said, it made me realize I've been making excuses. Tommy had become my unofficial apprentice. He'd signed up for my newsletter, with his parents' permission, and was asking increasingly sophisticated questions about digital marketing, audience engagement, and content creation. The kid had a natural instinct for it. Grandpa, he said during one of our phone calls, I've been reading your blog posts from the beginning. The early ones are good, but you can really see how your writing got stronger over time. That's what happens when you practice, I told him. Nobody starts out great at anything. You just have to be willing to be bad at it long enough to get good. He laughed. That's going in my notes. But the biggest change came from an unexpected source. One morning, I received an email from someone named Patricia Chen at a company called Silver Horizons Media. The subject line read, "Partnership Opportunity, Second Chapter Stories." I almost deleted it, assuming it was spam, but something made me click it open. "Dear Mr. Whitmore," it began. "My name is Patricia Chen, and I'm the content director at Silver Horizons Media. We produce digital content specifically for adults over 50, including podcasts, online courses, and subscription-based platforms. Your blog, Second Chapter Stories, was recommended to us by several readers who said your work had genuinely changed their lives. We're launching a new division focused on content for men over 65, and we believe your voice would be perfect for our audience. Would you be interested in discussing a potential collaboration?" I read the email twice, then looked up her company online. Silver Horizons Media was legitimate, a mid-sized content company based in Denver, with several successful platforms targeting older adults. They'd produced podcasts that had been featured in major publications, and their online courses had thousands of positive reviews. I called the number Patricia had provided. She answered on the second ring. "Mr. Whitmore, thank you so much for calling. I've been following your work for months. Your post about rebuilding purpose after loss was shared in our company Slack channel. It resonated with so many of our team members." We talked for 45 minutes. She explained their vision, a subscription platform specifically for men over 65, featuring weekly content about practical life skills, emotional health, financial planning, relationship advice, and personal growth. They wanted someone authentic, someone who'd actually lived through the challenges their audience was facing. "We're not looking for an influencer or someone playing a character," Patricia said. "We need someone real. Your readers trust you because you tell the truth, even when it's difficult." The offer was substantial, a 6-month contract to produce weekly content, with options for expansion based on performance. They'd handle all the technical aspects, marketing, and distribution. I'd focus entirely on creating content. "I need to think about this," I told her. "Of course, take your time. But Harold, what you've built is special. You've found a way to turn pain into purpose, isolation into community. That's exactly what we're trying to support." After we hung up, I sat in my kitchen for a long time, staring out at the bare trees in my yard. Margaret's voice seemed to whisper in my memory. "Harold, you were always meant for bigger things than this little house." I called Rachel that evening and told her about the opportunity. "Dad, that's incredible," she said. "Are you going to do it?" "I think so," I replied. "But it would mean some changes. Busier schedule, travel for recordings, probably more visibility than I'm used to." "You can handle it," she said with certainty that surprised me. "Look what you've already accomplished. This is just the next step." We talked for over an hour about the pros and cons, the logistics, the potential impact on my current business. Rachel asked smart questions and offered genuine support, not trying to take over but actually helping me think through the decision. "Whatever you decide," she said before we hung up, "I'm proud of you. We all are." 2 days later, I called Patricia back and accepted the offer. The contract was more generous than I'd expected, not just in terms of money, but in creative control. They wanted my authentic voice, my perspective, my approach. No scripts, no artificial enthusiasm, just honest conversation with men who needed to hear they weren't alone. My first recording session was scheduled for a Tuesday morning in February. They'd set up a home studio option. A company tech would come to my house and configure professional recording equipment in my spare bedroom. I wouldn't have to travel to Denver unless I wanted to. The night before the session, Tommy called me. "Grandpa, are you nervous?" "A little," I admitted. "It's been a long time since I've done anything that felt this public." "You're going to be great," he said with teenage confidence. "I've been telling everyone at school about your blog. My English teacher even assigned one of your posts for our class to read. Which one? The one about learning new things after 70. She said it was a perfect example of personal narrative writing. I felt a surge of pride. Well, I'll be damned. Grandpa. Sorry, kiddo. But that's really something. The recording session went better than expected. Patricia joined by video call while a local technician helped me with the equipment. We recorded 3 episodes in 2 hours, conversations about rebuilding identity after loss, finding new purpose in retirement, and dealing with family dynamics that change as everyone ages. Your delivery is perfect, Patricia said during a break. Natural, conversational, but authoritative. You sound like someone people would trust with their deepest concerns. The episodes were released over the following 3 weeks as part of their Wisdom Gained series. The response was immediate and intense. My email inbox flooded with messages from men across the country, and some from overseas, sharing their own stories of feeling forgotten, overlooked, or written off by their families. One email came from a 69-year-old man in Seattle whose 3 daughters rarely called. Harold, listening to your story made me realize I've been waiting for them to include me instead of building my own life. Today I signed up for a pottery class. It's a start. Another from a widower in Miami. I've been sitting in my condo for 2 years since my wife died, waiting for my son to visit. After hearing your podcast, I realized I need to stop waiting and start living. I'm volunteering at the Veterans Center next week. The messages kept coming, hundreds of them, all from men who'd felt invisible and were ready to step back into their own lives. The success of the podcast episodes led to more opportunities. Patricia offered me a regular weekly slot, which I accepted. A publisher in Nashville reached out about turning my blog content into a full-length book. A men's retreat center in Colorado invited me to speak at their quarterly gathering. But perhaps the most meaningful development was the community that began forming around the content. Men started connecting with each other through my blog comments and newsletter responses. They shared resources, offered support, even organized local meetups in their cities. I received a package one day from a group of widowers in Phoenix who'd started meeting monthly for coffee after discovering each other through my blog. Inside was a framed photo of 12 men all smiling with a note. Harold, you helped us find each other. We call ourselves the Second Chapter Society. Thank you for showing us we're not alone. That photo now sits on my desk where I can see it while I write. Rachel and Derek had become regular readers of my blog. Rachel even shared one of my posts on her Facebook page with the caption, "My dad is pretty amazing." It was a small gesture, but it meant everything. Tommy had started his own blog about teenage life and was already getting steady readership among his classmates. He applied the principles I'd taught him about authentic storytelling and community building. The kid was a natural. Grandpa, he told me during one of our weekly video calls, I used to think blogging was just people complaining online, but watching what you've built, it's like you're helping people find themselves again. That's exactly right, I said. And that's exactly what you're doing for kids your age who might be struggling with identity and belonging. Sarah had surprised everyone by starting an Instagram account where she posted art tutorials for other kids. It wasn't monetized. She was only 12, but she was already thinking about audience, engagement, and providing value to others. I want to help kids who feel like they're not good at art, she told me proudly, just like you help grown-ups who feel forgotten. Watching my grandchildren develop their own entrepreneurial instincts was more rewarding than any income I generated. Moving into the downtown condo was like stepping into a completely different life. The space was modern, bright, and perfectly sized for one person who didn't want to feel cramped or isolated. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the Tennessee River, and the building was walking distance to everything I needed: grocery stores, the library, coffee shops, even a small community garden where residents could rent plots. My neighbors were an interesting mix: young professionals, empty nesters like myself, retirees who wanted urban convenience without suburban isolation. The building had a community room where residents gathered for book clubs, game nights, and informal social hours. I joined the book club immediately. It met every other Thursday and was led by a retired literature professor named Janet who'd moved to Knoxville from Chicago. The discussions were lively, intelligent, and reminded me how much I'd missed stimulating conversation with peers. "Harold," Janet said after our third meeting, "you have such insightful observations about the books we read. Have you ever considered writing book reviews?" I told her about my blog and newsletter. She became one of my most enthusiastic subscribers and started recommending my work to other book club members. The community garden became my favorite weekend activity. I rented a small plot and started growing vegetables: tomatoes, peppers, herbs, lettuce. The physical work felt good, and the other gardeners were friendly, unpretentious people who appreciated simple conversation about soil conditions and seasonal planning. One Saturday morning while watering my tomato plants, I struck up a conversation with Eleanor, a 74-year-old retired nurse who was growing enough vegetables to supply a small farmer's market stand. "You know," she said, "I've been thinking about writing a blog about urban gardening for seniors, but I don't know anything about the internet." "I could teach you the basics," I offered, "if you're serious about it." Her face lit up. "Would you really?" Within a month, Eleanor had launched Growing Good Garden Wisdom from a Tennessee Granny. I helped her set up the blog, showed her how to take good photos of her plants, and taught her the fundamentals of email marketing. By summer, she had 200 subscribers and was selling vegetable seedlings through a simple online store. More importantly, she'd found a community of senior gardeners who shared tips, seasonal advice, and encouragement. "Harold," she told me one afternoon while we worked side by side in our plots, "I haven't felt this useful in years. Thank you for believing I had something worth sharing." That's when I realized something profound. Helping other people discover their own potential was even more fulfilling than building my own success. The idea came to me gradually, then all at once. If I could help Eleanor launch her gardening blog, maybe I could help other seniors discover their own digital voices. Not everyone wanted to write about grief and loneliness. Some had expertise in cooking, crafts, woodworking, financial planning, health and wellness. I started with a simple experiment. I offered to mentor 5 people for free, just to see if the process could be replicated. I posted the offer in the Senior Entrepreneurs Facebook group, expecting maybe a handful of responses. I received 127 applications in 3 days. I selected 5 people with diverse backgrounds and interests: a retired teacher from Maine who wanted to share literacy resources, a former mechanic from Texas interested in DIY tutorials, a widow from California with decades of frugal living wisdom, a retired military chaplain who wanted to offer spiritual guidance, and a former nurse practitioner who specialized in healthy aging. We met weekly via video call. I taught them everything I'd learned about blogging, email marketing, digital product creation, and audience building. But more importantly, I helped them identify their unique value propositions, what they knew that others needed to learn. Within 6 months, all 5 had launched successful blogs. 3 were earning consistent income. 1 had been approached by a major magazine for freelance writing, and another had landed a consulting contract with a senior living company. Word spread quickly through the senior entrepreneur community. I started getting emails from people asking about formal mentorship programs, online courses, group coaching sessions. Patricia from Silver Horizons Media called me one day with an interesting proposal. "Harold, we've been watching what you're doing with mentoring other seniors. Have you ever considered creating a comprehensive course about senior entrepreneurship? We'd love to partner with you on developing and marketing it." I thought about it for several days. My individual mentoring was fulfilling, but I could only work with a few people at a time. A structured course could help hundreds of seniors discover their own potential for meaningful work in their later years. "What would this look like?" I asked during our follow-up call. "A 12-week program," Patricia explained. "Video lessons, downloadable resources, live QA sessions, maybe even a private community forum. We'd handle all the technical production and marketing. You'd focus on content and teaching." The course development took 4 months. I worked with instructional designers, video producers, and educational consultants to create something comprehensive but accessible. We called it Second Chapter Success, Building Your Business After 65. The curriculum covered everything from identifying your expertise to setting up basic online systems, from writing compelling content to managing customer relationships. But it also addressed the emotional and psychological aspects of starting over later in life, dealing with self-doubt, managing family reactions, maintaining motivation when progress feels slow. We launched with a small test group of 50 participants. The feedback was extraordinary. Participants weren't just learning technical skills, they were rediscovering confidence, purpose, and community. Margaret from Wisconsin started a blog about vintage clothing restoration and was featured in a national sewing magazine within 6 months. Frank from Alabama launched a YouTube channel about backyard astronomy and gained 15,000 subscribers in his first year. Dorothy from Vermont created a line of printable organizing templates and was earning $2,000 a month within 8 months. But my favorite success story came from someone unexpected. My former neighbor from my old house, Bill Patterson. Bill was 71, recently widowed, and had been struggling with depression since his wife Linda passed the year before. We'd been friendly neighbors for over a decade, the kind who waved from their driveways and borrowed tools from each other. But we'd never been close friends. When word got around the neighborhood about my business success, Bill approached me one afternoon while I was loading boxes into my truck for the move. "Harold," he said, looking embarrassed, "I heard about what you've been doing online. That blog thing, is it true you're making real money from it?" "It's true," I said. "Took time to build, but yeah, it's working." He nodded slowly. "Linda always said I should write down my stories from the railroad. 42 years working for Norfolk Southern, saw a lot of changes, met a lot of characters." He paused. "Think there might be people interested in that kind of thing?" I studied his face. Bill looked tired, lost. I recognized that expression. I'd seen it in my own mirror not too long ago. "Bill, there are probably thousands of railroad enthusiasts and history buffs who'd love to hear those stories. Plus, a lot of men our age worked in industries that don't exist the same way anymore. You could be preserving important history while helping people understand what that kind of work was really like." His eyes brightened slightly. "You think so?" I set down the box I was carrying. "Tell you what, I'm moving to the condo next week, but I've got some time this weekend. Why don't you come by Saturday morning and I'll show you the basics of getting started." That Saturday, Bill arrived with a worn notebook filled with stories he'd been jotting down for years but never showed anyone. We spent 3 hours at my kitchen table, and by the end of the session, he had the outline for a blog called Rails and Tales. "I don't know about the computer stuff," he said uncertainly. "Nobody does when they start," I replied. "But if you really want to share these stories, you'll figure it out. The technical stuff is just tools. The real value is what you've lived through." I helped Bill set up his blog, showed him how to format posts, and taught him the basics of social media promotion. His first post, "The Last Steam Engine I Ever Saw," was simple but powerful. A story about witnessing the end of an era in American railroading. It got shared in a vintage train enthusiast group and received over 200 comments from people sharing their own railroad memories. Bill was hooked. Within 6 months, Rails and Tales had become a go-to resource for railroad history enthusiasts. Bill started selling simple digital products, downloadable railroad maps, historical timeline guides, even audio recordings of himself telling stories for people who preferred listening to reading. "Harold," he told me during one of our monthly check-ins, "I haven't felt this excited about anything since Linda was alive. These stories were just collecting dust in my notebook. Now they're helping people connect with history, with their own family stories about railroads." Bill's transformation reminded me of something important. Everyone has expertise in something. The challenge isn't lack of knowledge, it's lack of confidence and technical know-how. Once you solve those problems, amazing things can happen. In April, I received a call from Amanda Rodriguez at Beacon Hill Publishing, a respected house that specialized in self-help and personal development books for older adults. "Mr. Whitmore, I've been following your blog and listening to your podcast appearances. Your story is remarkable, but more than that, Your approach to helping other seniors discover their potential is exactly what we're looking for." She paused. "We'd like to offer you a book contract." I nearly dropped the phone. "A book contract?" "We want to publish Second Chapter Success as a comprehensive guide for seniors starting businesses or creative projects later in life. Not just the technical how-to, but the emotional journey, the mindset shifts, the real-world examples of people who've done it successfully." The advance was modest but fair, and the terms gave me significant control over content and marketing. More importantly, Beacon Hill had excellent distribution networks, bookstores, libraries, online retailers, even some major chains. "This book could reach thousands of seniors who don't know these opportunities exist," Amanda explained. "Your story proves it's possible. The book would show them how." I accepted the contract that afternoon. Writing the book was different from blogging or creating course content. It required deeper reflection, more structured thinking, and a level of vulnerability I wasn't entirely comfortable with. I had to examine not just what I'd accomplished, but why it mattered, what it meant for other people facing similar challenges. I interviewed dozens of the seniors I'd mentored, including Bill, Eleanor, and the participants from my online course. Their stories became case studies throughout the book, real people with real results, proving that reinvention after 65 wasn't just possible, but potentially transformative. Rachel offered to help with editing and fact-checking. It was the first time in years we'd collaborated on anything substantial, and I was surprised by how naturally we worked together. She had a good eye for clarity and flow, and she understood the emotional core of what I was trying to communicate. "Dad, this chapter about feeling invisible, it made me cry," she told me one afternoon as we worked through revisions. "I never realized how isolated you felt after Mom died." "You were dealing with your own grief," I said, "and your own busy life. I don't blame you for not seeing it." "But I should have seen it," she replied. "I should have asked better questions, paid closer attention." I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, and saw something I hadn't noticed before. She'd been carrying guilt about our relationship for years, just like I'd been carrying hurt. "Rachel," I said gently, "we can't change what happened, but we can choose how we move forward. And what we're doing right now, this conversation, this collaboration, this is moving forward." She smiled through her tears. "I love you, Dad." "I love you too, kiddo." As my platform continued growing, I started receiving a particular type of message more frequently. Men writing to say they wished there was a way to meet other people going through similar experiences, not just online, but in person. They wanted community, mentorship, hands-on learning opportunities. One email from a 67-year-old man in Colorado really struck me. "Harold, your content has been life-changing, but I'm still sitting alone in my apartment every evening. Is there any way to connect with other men who are building second chapters? I need to be around people who understand what this journey feels like." That got me thinking. What if there was a physical space where senior men could come together to learn, create, and support each other? Not a retirement community or assisted living facility, but something more dynamic, a retreat center focused on entrepreneurship, creativity, and personal growth for men over 60. I mentioned the idea during a phone call with Patricia from Silver Horizons Media. She was immediately interested. "We've been looking for opportunities to expand beyond digital content," she said. "A retreat center aligns perfectly with our mission, and you'd be the ideal person to develop the programming." Over the following months, we explored the concept in detail. The vision was a small retreat center in the mountains of Tennessee, maybe accommodating 20-30 men at a time for week-long intensives. The curriculum would combine practical business skills with personal development, outdoor activities, and peer mentoring. "Think about it," Patricia said during one of our planning sessions. "Most business retreats are designed for young entrepreneurs or corporate executives. There's almost nothing specifically for men over 60 who are starting something new." We weren't the only ones excited about the idea. When I mentioned the retreat concept in my newsletter, the response was overwhelming. Within 48 hours, I had over 400 men expressing interest in attending, many offering to pay deposits immediately. The retreat center project would require significant investment and planning, but both Silver Horizons Media and I were committed to making it happen. We started looking at properties in East Tennessee, places with natural beauty, modern amenities, and proximity to airports for travelers. My relationship with Rachel and Derek continued improving throughout the year. They'd started making real effort to include me in their lives, not just holiday obligations, but genuine involvement in their day-to-day experiences. Rachel called me every Tuesday evening, often while she was making dinner. We'd talk about her work challenges, the kids' progress in school, Derek's latest project, my business developments, real conversations between two adults who cared about each other. Derek had surprised me by becoming genuinely interested in my work. He'd read my book when it was published and left a thoughtful Amazon review praising my practical wisdom and authentic voice. He'd even recommended it to some of his colleagues who were approaching retirement. "Harold," he told me during a family barbecue that summer, "I owe you an apology. I used to think retirement meant you were done contributing to society. Watching what you've built changed my perspective completely." Tommy had become my business consultant. The kid had learned digital marketing faster than people twice his age and was offering insights about social media trends, video content, and reaching younger audiences. "Grandpa, you should start a TikTok account," he suggested one day. I laughed. "Tommy, I'm 73 years old. Nobody wants to see me dancing to pop music." "Not dancing," he said seriously. "Teaching. Short videos about business tips, life advice, overcoming challenges. There are tons of older people on TikTok now sharing wisdom. You'd be great at it." I considered his suggestion. "You think people would actually watch that? Are you kidding? Grandpa, you've got more life experience and business success than most of the 25-year-old life coaches on there. Plus, you're authentic. That's rare online." Sarah had started asking me about book writing. She wanted to create illustrated stories for younger kids, combining her artistic skills with storytelling. "Could you teach me how to publish books like you did, Grandpa?" "Absolutely," I said. "But first, you need to write something worth publishing. And that means understanding your audience, what kids your age want to read about, what problems you could help them solve through stories." She nodded seriously. "I've been thinking about books for kids whose grandparents live far away, like how to stay connected even when you can't see each other often." My heart swelled. That sounds like something a lot of families could use. The success of my book led to speaking opportunities I'd never anticipated. Libraries, community centers, senior organizations, even some corporate groups planning for their employees' retirements started inviting me to share my story. My first paid speaking engagement was at a retirement planning seminar in Nashville. I was nervous as hell. I'd never spoken to a group larger than 12 people before. But something magical happened when I started talking about the difference between retiring from something and retiring to something. "Most people think retirement is about stopping," I told the audience of about 80 people. "But what if it's actually about starting? What if the skills and wisdom you've accumulated over decades of work are actually your greatest assets for building something new?" The response was enthusiastic. People stayed afterward to ask questions, share their own stories, request information about my mentoring programs. 3 attendees signed up for my online course that same day. More speaking invitations followed. I spoke at AARP chapters, Rotary clubs, community colleges offering continuing education programs, even a few universities where intergenerational entrepreneurship was being studied. Each audience was different, but the core message remained the same. Age is not a barrier to meaningful achievement. Experience is an advantage, not a limitation. And the internet has democratized opportunity in ways that didn't exist when previous generations reached retirement age. My favorite speaking engagement was at a men's shed in Chattanooga, a community workshop where retired men gathered to work on projects, share skills, and combat social isolation. These were working-class guys who'd spent their careers in manufacturing, construction, transportation. Many felt left behind by economic changes and technological advances. "I'm not here to tell you to become tech experts," I said to the group of about 30 men, "but I am here to tell you that the internet is just a tool, like any other tool. And if you've got something valuable to share, which every single one of you does, there are people out there who need to hear it." I told them about Bill and his railroad stories, about Eleanor and her gardening wisdom, about the dozens of men I'd mentored who'd turned their life experiences into sustainable income streams. After my talk, a 68-year-old retired electrician named Frank approached me. "Harold, I've been rewiring houses for 45 years. Think people might want to learn basic electrical work for their homes?" "Frank," I said, "there are millions of homeowners who are intimidated by electrical work but can't afford to call professionals for every small job. You could teach them which projects they can safely handle themselves and when they need to call an expert." 6 months later, Frank's YouTube channel, Electrical Basics for Homeowners, had 23,000 subscribers and was generating enough income to supplement his Social Security significantly. More importantly, he felt useful again. After 18 months of planning, location scouting, and program development, we found the perfect property for our retreat center, a former summer camp in the Smoky Mountains, about an hour from Knoxville. 40 acres of wooded land with a main lodge, sleeping cabins, meeting spaces, and hiking trails. The facility needed significant renovation, but the bones were perfect. Silver Horizons Media provided the initial investment, while I contributed the curriculum design and program leadership. We called it Second Chapter Retreat, Entrepreneurship and Personal Growth for Men Over 60. Our first retreat was scheduled for October, accommodating 24 participants for 5 days. The registration filled within a week of opening, with a waiting list of over 100 men. The participants came from across the country: retired teachers, former military officers, displaced factory workers, men who'd lost their wives, men who felt disconnected from their adult children, men who simply wanted to build something meaningful with their remaining years. The schedule was intensive but not overwhelming. Morning sessions on business fundamentals, afternoon workshops on specific skills, writing, video creation, digital marketing, evening discussions about mindset, purpose, and overcoming age-related challenges. But the real magic happened during unstructured time. Men sharing stories around the fire pit, collaborating on projects during free periods, offering support and encouragement to each other. "Harold," said James, a 69-year-old retired history teacher from Oregon, "I came here thinking I was too old to learn new tricks, but being around all these guys who are starting over, it's inspiring as hell." James launched a podcast called Hidden History 3 months after the retreat. Within a year, it was being featured in educational newsletters and had attracted sponsorship from 2 history museums. The retreat program became so popular that we expanded to monthly sessions and started developing specialized intensives, one focused specifically on widowers, another for retired military personnel, a third for men interested in creative pursuits rather than traditional business ventures. The book had been out for 8 months when I received a call from a producer at 60 Minutes. They wanted to do a segment about seniors starting businesses later in life, and my story had been recommended by several sources. "Mr. Whitmore, your journey represents something we're seeing more frequently," the producer explained. "Baby boomers who aren't content with traditional retirement, who are using technology to build meaningful work. Would you be willing to participate in a feature story?" The interview took place at the retreat center, allowing them to capture both my personal story and the broader impact of the work I was doing. They interviewed several retreat participants, filmed me leading a workshop session, and talked with Bill about his railroad blog and Eleanor about her gardening success. The segment aired on a Sunday evening in March. My phone started ringing immediately, interview requests from other media outlets, speaking invitations from organizations across the country, emails from seniors who'd never heard of my work but were inspired by the television piece. But the call that meant the most came from Tommy, now a sophomore in high school. "Grandpa, we just watched you on TV. The whole family was cheering. You looked like a movie star up there." I laughed. I don't know about movie star, but thank you. No, seriously, you were so good. The way you talked about building something from nothing, about not letting age define what you can accomplish, it was powerful. I shared the video with all my friends. Rachel called an hour later, crying happy tears. Dad, I am so proud of you. Watching that segment, seeing how many people you've helped, it's incredible. Mom would be so proud too. That night I sat in my condo overlooking the river, thinking about the journey from that painful Christmas morning to this moment. I'd started with nothing but hurt feelings and time to fill. I'd built a business, found a community, discovered purpose I didn't know I was missing. But more than that, I'd proven something to myself. Being forgotten doesn't mean being finished. The media attention from 60 Minutes led to an opportunity I never could have imagined. Dr. Sarah Kim, a gerontologist at Vanderbilt University, reached out about collaborating on research about productive aging and late-life entrepreneurship. Mr. Whitmore, what you've accomplished isn't just inspiring, it's sociologically significant, she explained during our first meeting. You've created a model for how seniors can maintain agency, purpose, and financial independence in ways that previous generations never had access to. Dr. Kim was studying the psychological and economic benefits of meaningful work for adults over 65. She'd been tracking my blog readership, course participants, and retreat attendees, documenting improvements in mental health, social connection, and financial stability. The data is remarkable, she said, showing me charts and graphs. Men who participate in your programs show measurable improvements in depression scores, social engagement, and self-reported life satisfaction. You're not just teaching business skills, you're combating social isolation and age discrimination. She proposed a formal research partnership. Vanderbilt would provide funding for a 3-year study examining the impact of senior entrepreneurship programs on aging outcomes. I would serve as a consultant and case study subject while continuing to run my programs. The research would help legitimize what I'd been doing intuitively, proving that seniors weren't just capable of learning new skills and starting businesses, but that doing so provided significant health and wellness benefits. Harold, this could influence policy decisions about aging services, retirement planning, even healthcare approaches for seniors, Dr. Kim explained. Your work is pioneering a new model for what successful aging can look like. I agreed to the partnership, excited about the possibility of creating evidence-based support for senior entrepreneurship initiatives. One unexpected development was the interest from adult education programs and community colleges. Educators wanted to learn my methods for teaching technology and business skills to older adults. Mr. Whitmore, said Linda Foster, who directed the continuing education program at Pellissippi State Community College, we've been struggling to engage our senior students in digital literacy courses. They sign up but drop out when the material feels too technical or impersonal. Your approach seems to solve that problem. I spent a day observing their current classes. The instructors were competent, but they were teaching technology in isolation. How to use software, how to navigate websites, how to send emails. They weren't connecting those skills to meaningful purposes. The problem isn't that seniors can't learn technology, I told Linda afterward. It's that they don't see why they should. You're teaching them tools without showing them what they can build with those tools. I developed a pilot curriculum that connected digital skills to personal goals. Instead of starting with, here's how to create a Facebook account, we began with, what do you want to share with the world? Then we worked backward to the technical skills needed to make that sharing possible. The pilot class had 16 participants, all over 62. By the end of 8 weeks, 12 had launched some form of online presence. Blogs, social media accounts, small e-commerce stores, or digital portfolios of their work. Margaret Thompson, a 74-year-old retired librarian, created a website showcasing local history research and started offering virtual tours of historic neighborhoods. Within 6 months, she was earning $800 a month giving online presentations to historical societies across the Southeast. Carlos Mendez, a 69-year-old former chef, launched a bilingual cooking blog featuring traditional Mexican recipes passed down through his family. He started selling digital recipe collections and was approached by a food magazine about writing a monthly column. The success of the pilot program led to a partnership with the Tennessee Board of Regents to develop similar curricula for community colleges statewide. I found myself traveling across Tennessee, training instructors and helping develop age-appropriate digital entrepreneurship programs. "You're not just teaching seniors," observed Dr. Patricia Williams, the state coordinator for adult education. "You're changing how we think about aging and productivity. These people aren't learning computers to pass time. They're building legitimate businesses and creative platforms." In September, I was contacted by Marcus Chen, an independent filmmaker from Los Angeles who wanted to create a documentary about my work and its impact on the participants. "Harold, your story touches on so many important themes," Marcus explained during our video call. "Ageism, family dynamics, economic insecurity for seniors, the digital divide, social isolation. But more than that, it's a story about human resilience and the power of community." Marcus proposed following several of my mentees over 6 months, documenting their journeys from initial isolation to building online businesses and communities. The film would interweave their stories with my own background and the broader sociological implications of senior entrepreneurship. I was hesitant at first. The attention was flattering, but I worried about exploitation or sensationalism. "This isn't a feel-good human interest piece," Marcus assured me. "This is serious documentary work examining how our society treats aging and what happens when seniors take control of their own narratives." I agreed to participate, with the condition that all participants would maintain creative control over how their stories were presented. The film crew spent a week at the retreat center, capturing workshop sessions, one-on-one mentoring meetings, and informal conversations between participants. They also filmed at Eleanor's community garden, Bill's home office where he recorded his railroad podcast, and Frank's workshop where he created his electrical tutorial videos. "What strikes me most," Marcus said during our final interview, "is that none of these people were actually looking to become entrepreneurs. They were just looking to feel useful again. The business success was almost accidental." "That's exactly right," I replied. "When you help people rediscover their sense of purpose, everything else follows naturally. The money, the recognition, the community, those are byproducts of feeling valuable again." The documentary, titled Second Chapter, Seniors Reclaiming Their Stories, premiered at the Nashville Film Festival 8 months later. It won the Audience Award for Best Documentary Feature and was picked up for distribution by a streaming service. More importantly, it sparked national conversation about ageism, senior entrepreneurship, and the untapped potential of older adults in the digital economy. By my 74th birthday, which Rachel and Derek made sure to celebrate properly this time, my various programs and platforms were reaching over 15,000 seniors monthly. The retreat center was booked solid through the following year. The book had sold 28,000 copies and was being translated into Spanish and Portuguese, but I was starting to feel the limits of what one person could manage. Even with Patricia's support from Silver Horizons Media and a small team of assistants, I was getting stretched thin. That's when I received an unexpected call from Dr. Robert Chen, no relation to the filmmaker, the director of the National Institute on Aging. "Mr. Whitmore, we've been following your work with great interest. The research partnership with Vanderbilt has produced some remarkable data about the health and economic benefits of senior entrepreneurship programs." He paused. "We'd like to discuss the possibility of scaling your model nationally through a federal grant program." The meeting took place in Washington, D.C., at the National Institutes of Health campus. Dr. Chen and his team had prepared a comprehensive presentation about the potential impact of senior entrepreneurship programs on aging outcomes, healthcare costs, and economic productivity. "The data from your participants shows significant improvements in mental health, social engagement, and financial stability," Dr. Chen explained. "If we could replicate your model in communities across the country, we could potentially improve outcomes for hundreds of thousands of seniors while reducing healthcare costs and social service burdens." The proposed grant was substantial, $2.3 million over 3 years, to develop a replicable curriculum, train instructors in 10 pilot cities, and create a network of regional retreat centers. "We're not trying to take over your work," Dr. Chen assured me. "We want to amplify it. You'd maintain control over the curriculum and training standards. We'd provide infrastructure and research support." I thought about Margaret, about the years I'd spent feeling useless and forgotten. Then I thought about the hundreds of men who'd found new purpose through my programs, and the thousands more who might benefit from expanded access. "Dr. Chen," I said, "let's do it." Implementing the federal grant program was the most complex project I'd ever undertaken. We identified 10 pilot cities based on demographics, existing senior services, and local interest: Phoenix, Tampa, Denver, Portland, Richmond, Kansas City, Albuquerque, Boise, Charleston, and Burlington. Each location needed to recruit local coordinators, establish partnerships with community colleges or senior centers, adapt the curriculum for regional preferences, and train instructors in the unique challenges of teaching entrepreneurship to older adults. I spent 3 months traveling to each pilot city, conducting training workshops and meeting with local partners. The diversity of participants was remarkable: former executives and factory workers, teachers and farmers, men who'd been successful in traditional careers and others who'd struggled economically their entire lives. What they shared was a sense of invisibility, of being written off by a society that valued youth and innovation over experience and wisdom. In Phoenix, I met Jerome Washington, a 71-year-old former bus driver who'd always been passionate about jazz history. Within 6 months of completing our program, he'd launched Jazz Roots Radio, a weekly podcast featuring interviews with aging musicians and deep dives into musical history. The show gained enough following to attract sponsorship from jazz festivals and music education organizations. In Tampa, Maria Santos, the program expanded to include women after the first year, turned her knowledge of traditional Cuban cooking into Abuela's Kitchen, a subscription service delivering authentic recipe cards and cooking tutorial videos. She was earning enough to help support her daughter's family while preserving cultural traditions for younger generations. The Richmond program produced Samuel Martinez, a retired military mechanic who created detailed video tutorials about restoring classic cars. His YouTube channel became the go-to resource for vintage auto enthusiasts and generated enough income for Sam to buy his dream workshop. Each success story reinforced my belief that the problem wasn't lack of talent or knowledge among seniors. It was lack of opportunity and support systems. My grandson Tommy had become an integral part of my operation by his junior year of high school. What started as casual mentoring had evolved into a legitimate apprenticeship. He managed my social media accounts, helped optimize my website for search engines, and even created video content for my YouTube channel. "Grandpa, you need to be on Instagram," he told me one afternoon while updating my content calendar. "But not the way most old people are on Instagram. You need to be strategic about it." Tommy was right. His generation understood social media intuitively in ways that took me months to learn. But I understood content, audience psychology, and authentic communication in ways that most young influencers never grasped. Together, we created an Instagram strategy that combined my storytelling abilities with his technical knowledge. The account grew from 0 to 45,000 followers in 8 months, becoming another channel for reaching seniors who are more comfortable with visual content than long-form reading. "You know what's cool?" Tommy said one day while we reviewed analytics. "My friends think it's awesome that my grandpa is internet famous. Like actually cool, not just polite, that's nice cool." It meant everything to hear that. For years, I'd felt like an embarrassment to my family, the sad old man they had to manage during holidays. Now I was someone Tommy bragged about to his friends. Rachel had started bringing colleagues to family dinners specifically to meet me. Derek regularly shared my content on his professional social media accounts. Sarah was working on illustrations for a children's book I was writing about intergenerational entrepreneurship. The family dynamics had completely reversed. Instead of feeling like an obligation, I'd become someone they were proud to be associated with. The success of the national program caught the attention of aging organizations in other countries. I received invitations to speak in Canada, Australia, the United Kingdom, and several European nations where population aging was creating similar challenges. My first international engagement was in Melbourne, Australia, at a conference on productive aging. The audience of 500 included policymakers, researchers, service providers, and seniors themselves. The American model of senior entrepreneurship, I told them, isn't just about individual success stories. It's about fundamentally changing how society views aging. Instead of seeing seniors as burdens or has-beens, we can recognize them as untapped resources with decades of accumulated wisdom and experience. The response was enthusiastic. Within 6 months, I was consulting with organizations in 3 countries to adapt my curriculum for different cultural contexts and economic systems. The international work was fascinating but demanding. I found myself video calling with partners in different time zones, adapting content for different cultural perspectives on aging and work, and learning about social service systems I'd never encountered. But it was also profoundly meaningful. The challenges I'd faced, feeling invisible, struggling with purpose after loss, being dismissed because of age, were universal experiences among older adults worldwide. On a quiet Sunday morning in my condo, sipping coffee and watching the river flow past my windows, I reflected on the remarkable journey of the past 4 years. From feeling forgotten and useless to building a nationally recognized program that was improving lives across multiple countries. At 75, I was busier and more fulfilled than I'd been at 55. I was earning more money than during my peak working years. I had a community of thousands of people who looked to me for guidance and inspiration. But I was also acutely aware that I wouldn't be able to maintain this pace forever. The question that kept surfacing was, how do you ensure something you've built will outlast you? I'd been mentoring several younger seniors, men in their early 60s who showed exceptional leadership potential, to eventually take over various aspects of the work. But I wanted something more systematic, more sustainable. That's when I decided to establish the Second Chapter Foundation, a nonprofit organization dedicated to supporting senior entrepreneurship initiatives. The foundation would provide grants for seniors starting businesses, scholarships for entrepreneurship education, and research funding for age-related economic studies. I contributed the initial funding from my own business profits, but the goal was to make it self-sustaining through donations, corporate partnerships, and government contracts. Rachel, who'd recently been promoted to partner at her marketing firm, offered to serve on the foundation board. Derek volunteered his financial expertise for grant management and fiscal oversight. Even Tommy, despite being only 17, was appointed as the foundation's social media coordinator. "Dad," Rachel said during our first board meeting, "this foundation could help thousands of seniors who are dealing with what you dealt with. It's like you're turning your own pain into a solution for others." That observation hit me deeply. I had turned pain into purpose, isolation into community, invisibility into influence, and now I was creating systems to help others do the same thing. On Christmas Eve, exactly 4 years after that painful morning in Atlanta when I sat giftless under their tree, Rachel called me with an invitation. "Dad, we want to host Christmas at your place this year. The whole family wants to see your new condo, and honestly, we want to celebrate you for a change." I looked around my modern, comfortable living space, the wall of windows overlooking the river, the bookshelves filled with my published works, the desk where I wrote content that reached thousands of people weekly. "I'd love that," I said. They arrived Christmas morning with arms full of gifts, food, and genuine excitement. Tommy immediately wanted to see my home office setup. Sarah asked about the view from every window. Derek admired my coffee machine, an upgrade I'd finally made for myself. Rachel just hugged me and said, "Dad, this place is perfect for you." We gathered around my smaller but more intimate Christmas tree. This time there were gifts with my name on them, thoughtful ones that showed they'd been paying attention to my actual interests and needs. But the best gift came from Tommy. He handed me a professionally bound document titled The Harold Whitmore Digital Archive, 4 Years of Impact. "I've been working on this for months," he explained. "It's a compilation of your best blog posts, reader testimonials, success stories from people you've mentored, and data about the programs you've created. I flipped through the pages, seeing my journey documented with care and precision. Quotes from retreat participants, statistics about business launches, photographs from speaking engagements, even screenshots of social media posts where people shared how my work had changed their lives. Tommy, this is incredible. Grandpa, you've helped over 3,000 seniors start businesses or creative projects. You've generated millions of dollars in income for people who thought their earning years were over. You've created communities for men who felt completely alone. He paused. I wanted to make sure all of that was recorded properly. I looked around the room at my family, Rachel and Derek listening intently, Sarah sketching in the margins of her new art pad, Tommy beaming with pride about his project. You know, I said, 4 years ago I thought my story was ending. I felt forgotten, useless, invisible. I was waiting for other people to give my life meaning. I held up Tommy's compilation. But this shows me something important. My story wasn't ending 4 years ago. It was just beginning. The real Harold Whitmore wasn't the grieving widower sitting alone on Christmas morning. The real Harold Whitmore was someone who could transform pain into purpose, build community out of isolation, and create opportunities for people who'd been written off. Rachel wiped her eyes. Dad, we're so sorry it took us so long to see who you really are. Don't apologize, I said. Just remember, and when your own challenging seasons come, because they will, remember that being overlooked doesn't mean being finished. Sometimes the best chapters of our lives are the ones we write when everyone thinks the story is over. 6 months later, I was standing on the stage at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., addressing an audience of 2,000 people at the National Conference on Aging. The topic was, Redefining Productive Aging in the Digital Era. Looking out at the sea of faces, policymakers, researchers, service providers, and seniors themselves, I thought about that Christmas morning when I'd felt completely invisible. 4 years ago, I began, I was a lonely widower who felt like his useful years were behind him. My family had stopped calling. My community had moved on without me. I thought I was just waiting around to die. I clicked to the first slide, which showed the modest homepage of my original blog. Today, the programs I've developed have helped over 5,000 seniors start businesses, create content platforms, or launch creative projects. Our retreat centers in Tennessee and Colorado are booked through next year. The Second Chapter Foundation has awarded grants to 150 senior entrepreneurs in 35 states. The next slide showed financial data. $4.2 million in total income generated by program participants, 847 successful business launches, 23,000 jobs created or saved through senior entrepreneurship initiatives. But the numbers only tell part of the story, I continued. The real impact is in the letters I receive from men who've stopped contemplating suicide because they found purpose again. From women who've discovered financial independence after decades of economic vulnerability. From families who've reconnected because grandparents became interesting, dynamic people worth talking to. I told them about Jerome and his jazz podcast, about Eleanor and her gardening empire, about Bill and his railroad history preservation work. I shared data from Dr. Kim's research, showing measurable improvements in mental health, social connection, and physical wellness among program participants. We have a choice, I concluded. We can continue to warehouse seniors in retirement communities, assume they're done contributing, and watch healthcare costs spiral as isolation and depression take their toll. Or we can recognize that 65 is not the end of productivity. It's potentially the beginning of the most meaningful work of someone's life. The standing ovation lasted nearly 5 minutes. Afterward, I was approached by representatives from organizations across the country wanting to implement similar programs. But the moment that mattered most came when a 72-year-old woman from Baltimore approached me during the reception. Mr. Whitmore, she said, I've been feeling invisible since my husband died 3 years ago. My children treat me like I'm fragile and useless. Your talk made me realize I don't have to accept that. I handed her my card. Ma'am, you're not invisible. You're just surrounded by people who've forgotten how to see you. But that doesn't mean you're not there. She smiled through tears. I'm going to sign up for your course tomorrow. I look forward to seeing what you build, I replied. As I write this, I'm sitting in my home office in the condo, watching the sun set over the Tennessee River. It's been 5 years since that Christmas morning when I realized I was the only one without a gift under the tree. Today I received 47 emails from seniors who've launched businesses or creative projects after going through my programs. My retreat centers are expanding to include locations in California and North Carolina. The Second Chapter Foundation just approved funding for a senior entrepreneurship program specifically for military veterans. Tommy is now a college freshman studying digital marketing and business, with plans to eventually take over much of my operational work. Rachel has left her corporate job to start her own consulting firm, applying principles she learned from watching my journey. Derek is planning his own second chapter, developing a consulting practice for pharmaceutical companies, transitioning to digital marketing strategies. Even Sarah, now 14, has published her first illustrated children's book through Amazon's print-on-demand service. It's called Grandpa's Internet Adventure and tells the story of an older man who discovers he can build amazing things online. The family dynamics have completely transformed. Instead of obligatory holiday visits, we have regular working sessions where we collaborate on projects, share ideas, and support each other's goals. I'm not the forgotten patriarch anymore. I'm the family entrepreneur, the one who proved that starting over is always possible. But beyond my own family, I've had the privilege of watching thousands of seniors rediscover their sense of purpose and value. Men who felt discarded by their families have built thriving businesses. Women who thought their productive years were over have become leaders in their communities. People who were waiting to die have remembered how to live. If you've listened to this story all the way through, you've heard about transformation that began with rejection, about purpose discovered in silence, about communities built from isolation. The real gift I gave myself that Christmas morning wasn't a business or financial independence or even recognition from my family. The real gift was permission. Permission to stop waiting for other people to define my worth. Permission to believe I still had something valuable to offer. Permission to build the life I wanted instead of accepting the one I'd been given. If you're watching this and you feel invisible, forgotten, or written off, whether you're 35 or 85, I want you to know something. Your story isn't over. The chapter you're living right now might feel like an ending, but it could be a beginning. You don't need anyone's permission to matter. You don't need anyone's approval to start building something meaningful. You just need to believe that your experience, your knowledge, your perspective has value. And if you're someone's adult child, if you have aging parents or grandparents in your life, I want you to consider this. The older adults in your family aren't just repositories of memories or people who need managing. They're human beings with continued capacity for growth, contribution, and surprise. Don't assume they're done. Don't treat them like obligations. Ask them what they're excited about. Ask them what they're learning. Ask them what they want to build. You might be amazed by what they're capable of when someone finally bothers to ask. That Christmas morning 5 years ago, I reached into my wallet and pulled out a key to a life I'd built entirely on my own. But the real key wasn't made of brass. It was made of determination, built from the understanding that being forgotten doesn't mean being finished. It just means it's time to start remembering yourself. If this story moved you, if it made you think differently about aging, about family, about the potential that exists in every person regardless of their age, then I've accomplished what I set out to do. The gift under the tree that Christmas wasn't something my family could have given me anyway. It was something I had to give myself, the knowledge that I was worth more than how others chose to value me. And that gift, once given, can never be taken away. This story is dedicated to every senior who's felt invisible, every adult child who's made assumptions about their aging parents, and everyone who believes that the best chapters of life might still be unwritten.